Brother, sister, if you have ever taken a job knowing something about it didn't sit right with your conscience and told yourself it was just business, this biblical warning is for you. Work itself is not the danger. Scripture calls work good from the very first chapter of Genesis. When God placed Adam in the garden to tend and keep it before sin ever entered the world, the danger is not work. The danger is the quiet trade so many believers make without noticing. Trading conscience for a paycheck, one small compromise at a time, until the job has reshaped what they're willing to call acceptable. Paul tells us that whatever is not from faith is sin, meaning even lawful, ordinary work can become sin the moment it requires you to act against what you know to be true. Every job asks something of you in exchange for a wage, your time, your skill, sometimes your silence. Scripture never treats that trade as neutral. It asks what exactly you're becoming in the process of earning it. Today we are naming 6 kinds of jobs a Christian must never take, not because certain job titles are cursed, but because certain job requirements are incompatible with a life that actually belongs to God. Some of these will surprise you because they don't look like obvious sin from the outside. They look like career advancement, financial stability, even respectability. But Scripture asks us to examine not just what a job pays, but what it asks of us to earn it. None of this is about looking down on people currently working in difficult industries, or pretending every believer has the freedom to simply quit tomorrow. Some of you are in exactly these situations right now, trying to figure out what faithfulness looks like where you are. Wisdom rarely demands an immediate resignation. It usually asks for an honest first step: prayer, counsel, and a plan, rather than panic or despair. This is about naming the line clearly, so you can see it before you cross it, or begin praying seriously about crossing back. The first job you must never take is one that requires you to knowingly deceive people for gain. Proverbs says a false balance is an abomination to the Lord, but a just weight is his delight. Meaning God is not neutral about the small, everyday dishonesty built into certain sales structures, certain contracts, certain scripts you're handed and told to follow. If the job description includes misleading customers about what they're actually buying, hiding fees, exaggerating results, or pressuring vulnerable people into decisions that benefit you more than them, that is not simply an unpleasant part of the job. It is the job. You can be personally kind, personally honest in every other area of your life, and still be employed to run a system built on dishonesty. Ask yourself plainly, if my customer, client, or congregation knew exactly what I know about this product or process, would they still say yes? If the honest answer is no, the paycheck is coming from deception, no matter how professional the deception looks. Scripture doesn't grade dishonesty by how sophisticated it is. This applies whether you're the one writing the script or simply required to read it word for word without deviation. Because complicity doesn't require authorship, only participation. Even a small, low-level role inside a dishonest system still trades your integrity for someone else's profit margin, one transaction at a time. A false balance in a robe is still a false balance. The second job you must never take is one built to profit from someone else's addiction or ruin. Habakkuk pronounces woe on the one who builds his house by unjust gain, who sets his nest on high to be safe from the reach of harm, describing exactly the temptation to profit from systems designed to trap people rather than help them. This isn't about condemning every industry that touches struggle. Doctors, counselors, and even honest lenders work in hard spaces every day. It's about the specific job whose success metric is someone else's compulsion, designed to be harder to walk away from than to walk into, engineered around weakness rather than genuine need. If your bonus structure rewards you for how deep someone else sinks, examine what you're actually being paid to do. Consider too how the job trains you to talk about the people it profits from, as accounts, as conversion rates, as numbers to hit rather than souls to consider, because language that erases a person's humanity usually arrives long before the practice that exploits them does. A wage earned from someone else's captivity is not a wage God calls clean, even when it's entirely legal. The third job you must never take is one that requires you to treat people, including yourself, as objects rather than image bearers. Genesis tells us God made mankind in his own image, male and female, and called it very good, a dignity assigned before any job title, achievement, or usefulness. Any job that requires reducing a person to their body, their data, or their utility stripped of the dignity Scripture insists is theirs by design, is asking you to participate in undoing something God declared very good. This includes far more than the obvious industries. It includes any workplace culture that quietly trains you to see people as inputs to be optimized rather than souls to be honored. If the job requires you to look at another human being and see only their market value, that job is asking for more than your time. This is worth naming honestly even in jobs that market themselves as progressive or empowering, because a system can use flattering language and still ask you to sell what was never meant to be sold. Attention, affection, or a body made in God's image, repackaged as content. It's asking you to unlearn what you were taught in the very first chapter of the Bible. The fourth job you must never take is one that requires you to routinely act against your own conscience, and call it professionalism. Paul writes plainly that whatever does not proceed from faith is sin, meaning your conscience, formed by scripture and prayer, is not a minor personality quirk to override for career growth. If a job consistently asks you to sign what you don't believe, say what you don't mean, or prove what you privately know is wrong, and expects you to treat your discomfort as immaturity rather than information, that job is training you toward a seared conscience, one small yes at a time. Notice too how these jobs often reward the very people most willing to override their conscience with promotions and praise, while quietly sidelining anyone who keeps asking uncomfortable questions. Training an entire culture to treat a working conscience as a career liability rather than a gift from God. And this is why Scripture calls us to renew our minds daily, so a compromised environment cannot slowly reshape what we once refused to accept. The danger here rarely arrives as one dramatic demand. It arrives as 100 small ones, each easier to justify than the last, until the version of you who would have refused the first request no longer exists to object to the 100th. The fifth job you must never take is one deliberately structured to make consistent worship and Christian community impossible, with no room ever offered to protect it. Hebrews warns us not to neglect meeting together, as some are in the habit of doing, a warning aimed at exactly the slow drift a demanding, all-consuming job can produce. This is not about every job that occasionally requires a Sunday shift or a hard season of overtime. Faithful believers have always worked through genuinely difficult schedules. It's about a job whose entire design assumes total ownership of your time, your identity, and your loyalty, leaving no boundary you're permitted to hold on to for God. If your employer explicitly frames your faith, your family, or your church as competition for your loyalty, rather than a legitimate part of your life, that is not simply a demanding job. Watch for the subtle version of this too, a job that never explicitly forbids church, but structures on-call schedules, mandatory travel, and after-hours expectations so thoroughly that consistent worship quietly becomes impossible in practice, even while remaining technically permitted on paper. It is a job asking for the place in your life that belongs to God alone. The sixth job you must never take is one that requires you to actively work against justice for the vulnerable, whether through bribery, corruption, or looking away on command. Amos condemns those who trample the poor and turn aside the needy from justice at the gate, while living comfortably off what that injustice provides. If your role requires approving decisions you know will unfairly harm people with less power to fight back, or staying silent about corruption you're positioned to see clearly, that silence is not neutral, it is participation. This warning extends to seemingly ordinary roles too. The clerk who processes paperwork they know is falsified, the assistant who schedules meetings meant to intimidate rather than negotiate, the employee told simply to follow orders and let someone higher up carry the moral weight of the decision. Scripture never lets comfort excuse complicity. The gate where justice was denied still had witnesses who said nothing. Here is the pattern underneath all six. A job built on deception. A job that profits from someone else's ruin. A job that treats people as objects instead of image bearers. A job that trains your conscience to go quiet. A job that leaves no room for God. And a job that asks you to stay silent about injustice you're positioned to see. None of these six requires an obviously wicked employer. Most arrive wearing the ordinary language of performance metrics, company culture, and professional discretion. Every one of these is the same trade wearing a different uniform. Your integrity, exchanged for a paycheck that calls itself normal. If you recognized even one of these in your own work, hear this clearly. This Biblical warning was not built to shame you for needing to provide, or to pretend every believer has an easy exit available today. It was built to hand your discernment back to you. So the decision to stay, to change something, or to leave is made with open eyes rather than slow, unnoticed compromise. God is not asking you to distrust honest work. He is asking you to examine what a job is actually asking of you to earn its paycheck, and to bring that examination to Him honestly rather than avoiding it. This process of examination is rarely comfortable because it often requires admitting that a paycheck you've relied on for years came with a cost you hadn't fully named until now. But naming it honestly is the first step toward real freedom. Bring this to Him tonight. Ask Him to show you clearly where compromise has started to feel normal, and trust that the same God who is warning you now will provide for you. As you take whatever step faithfulness requires next, you are not disqualified from good, honest work because you once took a job you shouldn't have. You are simply being invited tonight to let God's definition of integrity reshape what your heart has learned to call acceptable. If this biblical warning named something you needed to hear, type "I hear the warning" in the comments below, so this community can stand with you as you bring it before God. And if you want more of these biblical warnings, the ones that name what feels normal but Scripture calls compromise, subscribe to Biblical Warning now, because the next warning your heart needs may already be waiting.